The moon hung heavy and full over the vast, crumbling kingdom of Eldren, casting an ethereal silver glow over the ancient stone castle that stood atop the highest hill. Its once proud banners were now faded, flapping weakly in the cold wind, and the walls bore scars of battles long since fought. Inside the great hall, torches flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows that seemed to dance like ghosts. Seated upon the throne was King Alden, his face a weathered map of lines and wrinkles, each marking a year of struggle and sacrifice. His hair, once a proud mane of gold, had turned white as frost, and his once strong shoulders now stooped with age. Yet his eyes, sharp and grey as a winter storm, betrayed the fire that still burned within him. Beside him sat Queen Serana, her beauty untouched by the years, though sorrow clung to her like a second skin. Her raven-black hair was streaked with silver, and her emerald-green eyes held a quiet wisdom that had been honed through decades of pain, love, and sacrifice. The weight of a kingdom that had been brought to its knees rested upon both their shoulders, but their love for each other had never wavered. Tonight, however, the air between them was heavy with unspoken tension. "Do you think it's true, Alden?" Serana asked, her voice soft but edged with worry. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the armrest of her throne. The rumors of the traitor within the court. Alden's jaw tightened. He had heard the same whispers, that someone close to them, someone they trusted, had been secretly conspiring with the Black Order, a ruthless band of mercenaries who had been terrorizing the kingdom's borders for months. The Black Order wanted Eldren for themselves, and their methods were as cruel as they were cunning. "Rumors are a dangerous thing, Serana," Alden said, his voice low and gravelly. "But I cannot ignore them. Too many of our patrols have been ambushed. Too many of our plans have fallen into enemy hands. Someone is feeding them information." Serana's hand went to the necklace she always wore, a simple silver chain with a single emerald pendant. It was a gift Alden had given her on their wedding day, decades ago, when they were young and the world had seemed full of endless possibilities. She clutched it now, as if drawing strength from its weight. "But who," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "who would betray us, after all we've endured, after all we've fought for?" "Trust is a blade that cuts deep when wielded by the wrong hand," Alden interrupted. His voice softened as he looked at her, his steely demeanor giving way to the man beneath the crown. "We will uncover the truth, Serana, together as we always have." The next morning the royal court gathered in the great hall. Knights in polished armor stood along the walls, their faces grim, while nobles whispered nervously among themselves. The air was thick with suspicion. At the head of the room, Alden and Serana sat side by side, their gazes sweeping over the assembled crowd like hawks searching for prey. Alden rose slowly, his presence commanding even in his old age. "Someone in this court has betrayed Eldren," he began, his voice ringing out with the weight of authority. "Someone here has sided with the Black Order, feeding them information that has cost us lives, land, and honor." A ripple of shock and outrage spread through the room, but Alden silenced it with a single raised hand. "We will uncover the traitor," he continued, "and they will face the justice of the crown." From the back of the hall, a voice spoke. It was low and calm, but it carried a sharp edge that made the room fall silent. "And what if the traitor is closer than you think, your majesty?" The crowd parted to reveal Lord Erindor, a tall, thin man with sharp features and a perpetual smirk that never reached his cold blue eyes. He was one of the king's oldest advisers, a man who had served the throne for over 30 years. Alden's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly, Erindor." Erindor stepped forward, his boots echoing against the stone floor. "There are whispers, my king," he said, his tone almost mocking, "that the Black Order's leader has connections to the Queen." The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Serana stiffened, her hand instinctively going to her necklace. Alden's face darkened like a brewing storm. "Choose your next words carefully, Erindor," the king growled. Erindor smiled thinly. "I mean no disrespect, your majesty, but there are those who wonder about Queen Serana's past. Before she became queen, she spent many years away from the castle, travelling to distant lands. Could it not be possible that she formed alliances we are unaware of?" Serana rose to her feet, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You dare accuse me?" she demanded, her eyes blazing. After everything I've done for this kingdom, for this throne. Erendor inclined his head slightly, feigning humility. I am merely suggesting we examine every possibility, my queen. After all, the Black Order seems to know us better than we know ourselves. Who better to feed them information than someone at the king's side? The tension in the room was palpable. Serana's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she met Alden's gaze, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Alden," she said, "you know me. You know my loyalty to you and to this kingdom. Do you truly believe I could betray you?" Alden looked at her, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. The bond between them, forged over decades of love and hardship, was unbreakable, or so they had always thought. "I know your heart, Serana," Alden said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "But I also know that the Black Order is cunning. If there is a connection, we must uncover it." That night Serana sat alone in her chambers, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. She turned the emerald pendant over in her hands, her thoughts racing. Erendor's words had planted a seed of doubt in the court, but worse than that, they had planted a seed of doubt in Alden. There was a knock at the door, and she looked up to see Alden standing there, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Serana," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "there's something you're not telling me." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Alden stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "The Black Order. Their leader, there are rumors that it's someone from your past. Someone you once loved." Serana's heart sank. She had hoped this day would never come, but now the truth was unavoidable. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clutched the necklace. "His name is Kael," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Years before I met you, before I became queen, I knew him. We were young and foolish, and I thought I loved him. But when I saw the darkness in his heart, I left him. I never thought he would return." Alden's jaw clenched, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, to her surprise, he reached out and took her hands in his. "Serana," he said softly, "we've faced worse threats than this together. If Kael thinks he can tear us apart, he's a fool." The following days were a blur of preparation. Alden and Serana worked together, uncovering the truth behind the Black Order's plans and rallying their forces for one final stand. When Kael and his army marched on the castle, it was Alden and Serana who led the charge, fighting side by side as they always had. The battle was fierce, but in the end, love and loyalty proved stronger than betrayal and hate. Kael was defeated, his army scattered, and Eldren stood strong once more. As the sun rose over the battlefield, painting the world in hues of gold and crimson, Alden turned to Serana, his face streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes filled with love. "Together," he said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Always," Serana replied, her hands slipping into his. And as they walked back to their castle, battered but victorious, they knew that no enemy, no matter how cunning, could ever break the bond they had forged through a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and unyielding trust.